I mean, what do you think is kind of the strongest opposition to your vision? I mean, I almost think that religion might be one of the big issues. I mean, is that kind of in terms of shaping public opinion?
So actually, no, religion is not one of the big issues. And here's why. The thing about religious arguments, religious-based arguments, is that religious people, what they believe is written down. It's something that you can appeal to. Whereas, people who come from a secular position, what they believe is much more slippery, and they can kind of jump around in terms of how they oppose what you're doing. So actually, no, I actually find that when I talk to religious people, yes, they may start out thinking, oh dear, this is like challenging God's plan and all this, but it's easy to show that that's not the case. You can just say, well, first of all, last I heard, God was supposed to be omnipotent, and therefore, he can perfectly well strike you down with a thunderbolt, however healthy you are. And secondly, one thing that we can totally extract from Scripture, whatever Scripture you like, is that what we're supposed to be doing down here before God calls time on us is to minimize suffering. And there's no question at all that aging causes far more suffering than any other phenomenon of today's world. Therefore, it would clearly be a sin not to be working to eliminate aging. I'm not saying that I give this argument and people immediately turn around and say, oh dear, I haven't thought of that, here is a large check. But, they do go very quiet very quickly, put it like that. So yeah, the religious community is not the problem. The fundamental problem is that humanity has been aware of aging since the beginning of civilization, and has been aware that it's absolutely horrifying. And most people have only one way that they're able to cope with that, namely to put it out of their minds and get on with their miserably short lives and make the best of it, right? And the way they do that is essentially by tricking themselves into some kind of view that aging is some kind of blessing in disguise, right? So they'll say to themselves things like, oh dear, well, we put all the people if nobody's dying anymore, things like that. And then they will immediately switch off their brains, rather than take the risk of actually thinking about this and realizing that that's actually complete nonsense. Which, I mean, I've been saying ever since 15 years ago in my TED Talk that, I've been giving the answers to these questions, but nobody wants to hear the answers. They want to carry on thinking that aging is a blessing in disguise so as to not get their hopes up. Now, of course, at some point, the proximity, how close we are to actually achieving this, will get to a sufficient stage that the fear of getting one's hopes up can finally be dismissed, and people can actually get their hopes up and get emotionally invested in it. But we're not there yet, and until we do get there, I have to spend my life talking to journalists and